Welcome to episode 110 of The Fog and the Whirlwind. There's been a lot of stuff going on lately, so I'm going to give you some updates first about what I'm doing. Due to being in a certain stage of life, I'm not going to be able to upload as much as I would like, but that's okay. And I want to assure you that when it comes to the quality of the episodes, I will still be delivering good episodes for you guys about history, politics, political theory, as well as current events. I'm also going to be doing my best to go live once a week, every Monday at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you guys can catch me there once a week. But when it comes to the real cream of the crop, which is something that really fires me up, which is an episode just like this that you can find on Spotify, Audible, YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, as well as Amazon Music. My pre recorded episodes that are a little bit longer most of the time, not always, but most of the time, those are going to be uploaded a little bit more irregularly, and that's because of my job circumstance. But make sure that you're following me. I want to assure you that I'm not going away. It may be a little bit more rare that these episodes come out. I'm going to try to at least put out a couple a month. If I can, I'm going to try to do one once a week. But I'm going to do my best to make sure that whenever it does come out, it's a kind of episode that you enjoy. I'm going for quality over quantity. Also, with my social media situation, the handles every now and then will change. But something that does not change is my Substack URL. thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe is the best way where you guys can keep up with me. Join the newsletter and get updates. And you can also, if you want to find me on social media, a good rule of thumb is just go to the most recent video I've made. Then you can go to the description of it on YouTube, or if it's on Rumble or Odyssey. Heck, if you're on Spotify, just go to the most recent episode and look in the description. That's the best way to find my most current social media if you want to follow me on X or Instagram or Gab, anywhere like that. Okay. This series, as you could tell, is about amillennialism. Now, the way that I was at first promoting this, it was going to be a series contrasting premillennial dispensationalism versus amillennialism. But it's important to remember it's not enough to just be against something. I didn't want to make a series simply attacking the premillennial dispensationalist position. I really wanted to make a series where I make the case, really with the help of Kim Riddlebarger, for amillennialism. And I've been following a lot of cool podcasters lately who are reading books there in their podcast so that the audience can hear them. This is too important for me to just do a quick review. I actually, if you guys have been following this podcast closely enough, that's how I started. I did a review of the book, told you I would probably talk about premillennialism versus amillennialism later, but eventually I decided, this is just so important. These facts are so essential. The background that Riddlebarger does on this topic is too good for me to just give you a glimpse. I need to give you everything that I can. So this is going to be a series where I read this book so you guys can enjoy it as an audiobook, but also you're going to get Josh's commentary, my commentary here on The Fog and the Whirlwind of what I think as I'm reading it. Now, for those of you who do what I mentioned earlier, if you go to thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid supporter, there's going to be certain commentary that you guys get, you're privy to, that everyone else does not. I also want to tell you guys that because I want to give my paid supporters some benefits for giving me money monthly or yearly to help build this platform up. I want to eventually get to the point where I can do this full time so I can put out even more content and help and serve you, my audience. Okay? I hope that clears everything up. If it does not, comment on Substack or on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. You can actually comment on Spotify too now. So make sure you leave a comment and I will do my best to answer any questions you have in future episodes. But we are going to now begin this series. This is a case for amillennialism. I'm going to have an introduction and then begin with the very beginning of this book. Before I pick up Kim Riddlebarger's book, I want to begin by talking about why. Why am I doing this? What purpose does it serve, Josh? Okay, that's a fair enough question. Let me go ahead and talk to you about some of the reasons why. Pete Quinones has talked recently about the right wing, and understand I'm talking about the real right wing, not the subverters, not the neoconservative types, not the establishment, not the media. I'm talking about real people on the right, people like Pete Quinones, Thomas 777, the men in the Thought Crime Syndicate, and others out there as well. And Pete Quinones has said, we are still in the philosophy stage. We are still figuring out who we are. This is a good reason for me to not go out of my way to attack other people who are podcasting, at least not publicly. If you come to me privately and ask questions, I may level some criticisms at them, but I'll do my best to do so in a fair and good faith manner. But when it comes to being out here, I don't go out of my way to attack people in our space. Who I will attack are the fakes, the subverters, the neoconservatives, and the establishment types who like to posture like there's something else. Something that happened recently was interesting. Tucker Carlson's interview of Vladimir Putin was probably his interview that got the most views, if I had to guess. I don't have data to back that up. This is just my gut talking. But secondly, I would say Daryl Cooper, he talked to Daryl Cooper as well about history. This is the first time he went on, the time where he talked to him about Winston Churchill in World War II. That also got millions of views. Recently, he had Daryl Cooper back on. They talked about Jeffrey Epstein. That episode did very well as well. But the episode between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz got a lot of attention as well. And this episode, here's my commentary on it initially and how it ties into this topic. First of all, we're not used to this. I've told many people this in my personal life. By and large, people are used to going home from work and turning on Fox News or turning on some other show where if a U.S. senator is brought on, they're not asked any difficult questions. It's just, here you are, you're a brave conservative fighting against those stupid Democrats. We applaud you for that. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And that's really it. There's hardly anything of substance said. Tucker Carlson decided he wasn't going to do that. It may be that he was doing this to get the views because he wanted to be contrarian, or it came from a genuine part of his heart. And it also could have come from the fact that he knows that his audience wants to hear these questions answered. Whatever his reason, I'm not going to speculate or attack his motive. That's not the purpose of what I'm saying. He sat down with Ted Cruz and asked him a number of questions that are not even particularly hard, but that senators are not used to having. They're not used to being asked these questions. And from the reaction that this episode got, we as people, we as Americans, people on the right, are not used to watching interviews like this. We're not used to seeing a senator be questioned like this. As a result, a lot of people got very angry, especially people who are used to watching Sean Hannity interview Lindsey Graham. So I wanted to point that out first of all. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Secondly, this conversation is not really a fringe topic anymore. As I said, we are in the philosophy stage. I'm quoting Pete Quinones when I say that. We are trying to figure out what is the real right-wing position on war. Is it an echo of James Madison, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson? I've said this before, but in case you're new, I'm going to repeat it again. George Washington warned on his way out of office about entangling alliances. Thomas Jefferson famously said, peace, commerce, and trade with all nations, entangling alliances with none. James Madison said that our nation must not be a knight roaming around the world seeking monsters to destroy. That's what the people who founded this nation said. So on the one hand, that's one direction for the right. The other direction for the right is the direction of Bill Kristol, George Bush, meaning George H.W. Bush, secondly, George W. Bush, and Dick Cheney, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. That's the other direction for the right. And I would argue that those people are not really on the right. They're more of a neoconservative, which really, at its core, is neoliberal. These people came, many cases, from Eastern Europe. They were Trotskyists. They came over here, they infiltrated the school system, especially the universities. And if you want data and more information on that, I mentioned P. Quinones a minute ago. Listen to his episode with Paul Gottfried about neoconservatism, where they give some of the receipts and name some of the names of the people who came from the Trotskyite wing of the Communist Party, came to America and started the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party. Not only did they do that, but they did get in there, and then along with people like William F. Buckley, kicked out right-wingers, real right-wingers from the, what's the best term? The approved section of the Republican Party / country club Rockefeller right wing, trademark pending. So that's what they did. They kicked out the real ones, rebranded and said, no, we're right, and ran on bombing the Middle East, getting involved in other wars, globalism. And also, by the way, when it comes to countries sending jobs overseas, that's no big deal because the American worker doesn't matter that much. That's the other part of it, too. Hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, I've already given you a source that you can go to listen to people's names brought up and the specifics on that section. But I have to gloss over it now because that's not the point of this episode. But something that's important to think about, back to Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, is that you cannot argue someone out of a political position when they arrive at it for religious reasons. What am I talking about? Listen up.
The reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the.
It's in Genesis, but so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. And you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker,
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
So is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the
God's
descendants of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Okay, I played that for you because I wanted to give you some context. This is an important conversation happening on the right. This conversation about foreign policy, that's the broader conversation that happened between Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson. But after that, that's the outer shell of the onion, maybe even the skin of the onion. You've got to get through an onion sometimes, one layer at a time. You can, if you have a sharp enough knife and enough force, cut right through it. But you mainly need to cut at an angle and peel the layers back to have a fruitful, be able to use this onion the best if you want to make a sandwich. If you cut right through, you can dice it, I suppose. The analogy holds true. This is a conversation that needs to happen because now we're going into the why supporting of Israel. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more for my paid supporters. But since this is a conversation that needs to happen, you have to look at the end times. And that is the purpose of this series, to look at the end times together. Me talking to you, you in the comments. This is a bit of a series I'm going to do so that we can look at together, okay, what does the Bible say about the end times really? And where does premillennial dispensationalism originate from? And then you can start to realize, okay, but so does any of this come from a rejection of Reformed values, mainline in Protestant churches, for why people like Senator Ted Cruz exist and why they have the beliefs that they have? That's the purpose of this. This is a theological problem at its core, a theological difference, more than it is even a political one. You can argue and bring up facts all the time with people like Senator Cruz, but because they believe religiously different from you, it's going to be very hard to move them, especially if they're not open to changing their minds. I'll go into that a little bit in the future in terms of arguing and debates. That's a topic a little bit later. Now let's get into Kim Riddlebarger's book. A Case for Amillenialism by Kim Riddlebarger, Understanding the End Times. To the introduction we go. From my earliest youth, I was taught that a secret rapture of Christian believers was a cardinal doctrine of the Christian faith. I recall our family gathering in front of the television to watch Howard C. Estep of the World Prophetic Ministry explained how the Arab-Israeli conflict was setting the stage for the coming of the Antichrist. I just want the listener, this is me now, Josh talking, to note how many years ago this is being talked about. And yet, so many years later, has anything really changed? People preach all the time, we're in the end times. Jesus is just about to come back and do a secret rapture. And a lot of people say, well, that's just because of things going on in the Middle East right now. Not really. Anytime there's a development in the Middle East, so many of these preachers say, oh, it's just about to happen, guys. Keep your eye on the news. Keep your eye on the news. Jesus is going to come down. He's going to swing low on that sweet chariot, and we're all going to be taken up to heaven in a rapture. We're going to look at the rapture in this series specifically, but also at the totality of that kind of theology. Let me continue reading Riddlebarger's words. This man, Estep told us, would dazzle the world with his solution to the problems of the Middle East, guaranteeing peace for Israel. In the panic caused by the sudden removal of Christians from the earth after the rapture, the entire world would embrace this demonic leader who would preside over a 10-nation confederacy and a revived Roman Empire of sorts. Shortly thereafter, Israel would be betrayed, and 7 years of horrible tribulation would pass before Jesus Christ would return to earth, put an end to the Antichrist and the devil who empowered him. The subject of Bible prophecy has interested me ever since. As a teenager, I read with utter fascination Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth. Lindsey gave biblical answers to the tumult and uncertainty which characterized the 60s. I wasn't the only one fascinated by Lindsey's book. The Late Great Planet Earth became the best-selling book of the 1970s, ensuring that dispensational premillennialism, a term for his book's view of the end times, would remain a major influence upon American evangelicalism for a generation to come. Many of us thought that the coming and going of Y2K in the beginning of a new millennium would cause people to question dispensational assumptions and preoccupation with signs of the end. However, the success of the Left Behind series of end-time novels, authored by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, proves the influence and staying power of dispensational teaching. LaHaye and Jenkins have equaled, if not surpassed, Lindsay's amazing publishing success. Because dispensationalism is so popular, the question is rarely asked: do these books and the dispensational theology that they reflect what the scriptures represent? The dispensational theology they represent reflect what the scriptures actually teach about the return of Christ in the millennial age. As one born and bred dispensationalist, I know these authors and the people who read their books to be sincere and committed Christians. But after a difficult journey from dispensationalism to the theology of the Protestant Reformation, I have come to believe that these books and the particular interpretation of biblical prophecy they present seriously default at many points. My goal in writing this book is to humbly attempt to point out these errors and provide what I think is a more biblical way to understand the Bible's teaching on the coming of the Lord in the millennial age. It is difficult to write a readable book on a complicated subject. Eschatology, the study of future things, is by all accounts a complicated subject. Christians are deeply divided about these matters, and discussions of future events naturally tend toward sensationalism and undue speculation. Sadly, this is what we have seen in many recent books about this subject. Therefore, a brief word of explanation about the nature and scope of this book is in order. My purpose is to set forth the historic Protestant understanding of the millennial age. This position is commonly known as Amillenialism and is centered in the present reign of Jesus Christ. Amillenialism is grounded in redemptive history, the historical acts of God as they unfold in the Bible to provide for the salvation of his people. Although it is commonly argued that amillennialians, I'll pause right here. Most of the time when writing about this topic, Kim Riddlebarger refers to this position, or the people that hold this position, as amillennialians. That word is not used that often anymore. Most people say amillennialists. For the sake of verbal habit that I have, there will be times where instead of reading the word in the book, amillennialian, I may inadvertently replace it with amillennialist, and I won't bother to correct myself for the sake of brevity. Back to the text. Although it is commonly argued that amillennialians do not believe in any millennial age, the term itself, amillennial, could apply as such. This is not the case. Amillennialians believe that the millennium is a present reality, Christ's heavenly reign, not a future hope, Christ's rule on earth after his return. Although amillennialism has fallen into disfavor among prophecy devotees, as Sean Spencer would say, I've heard it both ways. I believe this position makes the best sense of the biblical passages that address the subject. So I write from a Reformed perspective and make no pretense of being neutral on the millennial question. However, a case for amillennialism is not intended to be a comprehensive treatment of eschatology. That has already been done. The scope of this effort is limited to an evaluation of the three prominent millennial views held by Christians: amillennialism, postmillennialism, and premillennialism. Because this is a controversial subject, a number of biblical, theological, and historical matters are developed in some detail. Recent discussions of this subject, while interesting and informative, have suffered due to space limitations and editorial constraints. To make my case for amillennialism in an effective manner, I have divided the discussion into 4 parts, each of which treats one particular aspect of this topic. Part 1 includes definitions of key theological terms associated with the millennial question, including an overview of millennial viewpoints. This is followed by a discussion of hermeneutics, the science of biblical interpretation, which grapples with the question: how do our theological presuppositions affect our understandings of the millennial age? Part 2 develops a number of biblical and theological matters, which will enable us to correctly understand the biblical data regarding the millennium. This section will also discuss the This section will also discuss the Old Testament expectation of the last days and the development of this theme throughout the New. I will offer a survey of the Old. I keep getting that wrong, guys. Excuse me. I will offer a survey of the New Testament's writers' use of the terms this age and the age to come, as well as the related terms already and not yet. This so-called two-age model serves as the interpretive grid through which amillennialists should understand the biblical concept of future history. Such a model enables us to make sense of eschatological language in the New Testament, specifically as it relates to the future and the millennial age. I will also discuss the kingdom of God, Christ's resurrection, the new creation, and the New Testament's identification of the church as the Israel of God. Part 2 concludes with a discussion of the heart of New Testament eschatology, our Lord's second advent. Part 3 discusses key biblical passages bearing upon the millennial age. The exposition of Daniel 9:24-27 calls attention to the context of messianic prophecy and answers a specific question. Does Daniel teach a future 7-year tribulation period? The exposition of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and Mark 13, discusses Jesus' teaching about the signs of the end and the future course of redemptive history. The exposition of Romans 11 wrestles with the question, is a distinct future for ethnic Israel in God's redemptive purposes? Concluding part 3 is an exposition of the critical millennial text, Revelation 21-10, and such matters as John's use of symbolism, the binding of Satan, the first resurrection, the revolt of the nations, and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Part 4 evaluates the main problems of the different millennial positions. What are the biblical and theological questions facing pre, post, and amillennialians? What about the presence of evil during the millennial age? Does the Bible teach that a golden age lies ahead of the church? Does the Bible teach that the millennium is characterized by a return to Old Testament types and shadows, as claimed by dispensationalists? Does the Bible teach that God's coming occurred in AD 70 when God's judgment fell upon Israel, Jerusalem, and its temple as claimed by preterists? What about the charge that amillennialians do not interpret the Bible literally? What about the future of the nation of Israel? There are consequences for our millennial views, and we need to be aware of them. One final note is in order. Sadly, when it comes to eschatology, a great deal of ad hominem argumentation goes on. For example, dispensationalists accuse amillennialists of being anti-Semitic, liberal, or of spiritualizing the Bible by not taking the Bible literally. Amillennialists accuse dispensationalists of being literalists who are prone to sensationalism. While we may have to agree to disagree, we should always strive to conduct this debate with charity and respect. This is going to be a shorter episode, most likely, than the other ones that I do. I don't have a lot to add in the way of commentary. This is a really good introduction for this book. I'm very excited to continue to read this to you. More than likely, if you click here on YouTube, Rumble, or Odyssey, it's going to just be a picture of this book, maybe a different kind of background and my voice, because there's times whenever I do a podcast that I'm fine with just not showing my face. Because frankly, if I did show my face, it would just be me looking down away from the camera at this book as I read. So I may as well just give you something else to look at for this podcast. I know there's some of you who are like, well, we like looking at you while you talk and cover politics. Well, tune into the live stream. That's not the purpose of this series here. My purpose here is to read this book. So I want to thank you again for listening to this episode. I'm going to catch you on the next one where I will read chapter 1 and give you my commentary. And for those of you who are my paid supporters, don't go away. I've got a little bit more commentary that I want to throw at you guys. But you got to be a paid supporter at thefogandwhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe to hear it. God bless, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for watching and listening to The Fog and the Whirlwind. Do me a big favor and press the like button wherever you are watching or listening to this. make sure you are subscribed and following as well. The best place for you to keep up with the work that I'm doing is to go to Substack. I like putting my work out there because they are very committed to freedom of speech. They're also user-friendly. Go to thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Again, that is thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Also, look in the description of this episode to find me on social media. The links and the handles are all there. Thanks again.